Hi, I'm Dr. Hector Garcia. I'm a researcher, an author, and a clinical psychologist. Views expressed here are, of course, my own. The COVID-19 pandemic has ground the world to a halt, killed over 1 million people worldwide and counting, with the United States leading the death count, and indeed has infected the President of the United States. While a global army of scientists races to develop a vaccine, frontline medical workers risk their lives treating the sick, and epidemiologists fight to flatten COVID-19's soaring growth curve. In all of these efforts, social distancing is crucial. Accordingly, business owners have shut their doors, and the global citizenry has borne the emotional weight of social isolation, among so many other economic, psychological, and ultimate sacrifices. Scores of courageous medical personnel who contracted COVID-19 in the line of duty have already died. Overall, our battle against coronavirus reflects that remarkable human ability to close ranks for a common cause, and indeed may constitute the single largest cooperative effort in our species' history. Yet, amid so many cooperators, saboteurs are shredding this essential, life-saving social contract to stay away and to mask up. Nowhere is this disregard for public health so flagrant as in the United States. We have a moral obligation to understand why. As examples, golf courses around the nation have been allowed to remain open, as have churches, along with beaches in Florida. With emboldening tweets from Donald Trump, anti-lockdown rallies have festered, touting the global pandemic as a liberal media conspiracy, and containment efforts as anti-freedom. And Trump has held rallies filled with supporters refusing to wear masks. Notably, these are gatherings of potentially infectious people in close contact with one another. And unsurprisingly, the virus has begun to kill protesters, Trump supporters, and defiant churchgoers, and has infected President Donald Trump. While the common thread of churches, Trump, and even golf courses may be political conservatism, how do we make sense of this dangerously irrational behavior? Before I explain, let me just say that, liberal or conservative, we all occupy the same space. We have to learn how to live together. And most certainly, we are better able to withstand outside threats, such as coronavirus, when we cooperate. To do so requires that we remain rational and detach ourselves from volatile emotions that get triggered when we start talking politics. There is no better way to do this than through the objective lens of science. It is ironic that our sensible, science-based efforts to remove ourselves from corona's onslaught push against ancient instincts designed to help us survive infectious disease. In other words, our germ survival instincts may have outlived their utility, and today may be helping to actually spread COVID-19 rather than contain it. It may be surprising to learn that these very instincts drive our political behaviors. Given that our strategic responses to disease are utterly dependent on political processes, understanding our evolved responses to germs is now literally a matter of life and death. To ensure our future, we may start with a look to our past. Xenophobia and fear of germs as adaptations. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors knew nothing about what diseases really were. The microbiologic world was invisible to them. They had no vaccines. They had no antibiotics, but they were, as we are now, equipped with what is known in the evolutionary sciences as a behavioral immune system, a set of emotional responses such as disgust, fear, and hostility that help them withdraw from potential pathogens. For example, rotting flesh carries disease, so we evolved a sense of disgust when presented with it, and the impulse to get away. Given that humans were the biggest vectors of disease, that immune system included a prejudicial psychology against outsiders. Strangers potentially carried germs for which the tribe had no immunity. And something as simple as the common cold could wipe out an entire tribe. Fear of germs, like so many other traits, falls on the natural curve. Some of us fear germs very much, some of us fear germs very little, and most of us fall somewhere in between. Likewise, fear of outsiders also falls on the natural curve. Now, what it means when something falls on the natural curve is that there are advantages and disadvantages to a certain trait, and we tend to see variation in its prevalence in a population. In our ancestral environments, before we had vaccines or antibiotics or protective face masks, xenophobia helped our ancestors avoid infectious outsiders. But there were also advantages to xenophilia, an attraction to outsiders, which gave our ancestors greater access to things like new technologies and mates outside their gene pool, which prevented inbreeding. As I expand upon in my latest book, Sex, Power, and Partisanship, one of the most robust findings in the science of our political psychology is that those who are more germ and xenophobic, on average, tend to be more politically conservative. It makes sense then that today those with greater xenophobia would be drawn to politics that are hawkish in their foreign policy, take tough stances on border security, and posture against affirmative action, which helps people who may be seen as outsiders. Interestingly, those on the conservative end, on average, tend to be not only more fearful of germs and outsiders, but to be generally more fearful. Imaging studies even find that conservatives tend to have a larger amygdala, a brain structure that generates our fear responses. So how is it that those on the far right, who tend to be dispositionally more germ-phobic, are now refusing to wear masks at protests or Trump rallies, putting not only others but themselves in mortal danger? The explanation to this stunning contradiction: tribalism. The counterpart to turning away from outsiders is turning inward to the tribe. Since we were hunter-gatherers, the need for tribal belonging was critical. Not only did we have to turn inward to avoid outsiders' germs, but life outside the circle was filled with predators, hostile outside tribes, and was incredibly dangerous. In short, being rejected from the tribe would have been a death sentence. Adding to this threat, non-cooperators, or simply those violating social norms, were often executed by the tribe. Sometimes the violations were entirely fabricated. As one example, humans have murdered members of their own social group for things like suspected witchcraft for thousands of years. These pressures drove our tendency to display signals of commitment to our peers. Sometimes the signals are visual. Think of Aboriginal tribes that wear similar regalia to signify belonging, similar headdresses, similar colors, tribal scarring, or even tattoos. Today's MAGA hats, protest signs, political bumper stickers, and t-shirts tell the other members of the troop that you're with them. But at other times, the signal is showing agreement, whether about a cultural norm or about whom in the tribe is practicing witchcraft, about a religious idea, and today, a political stance. And unfortunately, rejecting science, whether it's the science of climate change, evolution, or now of infectious disease, has become a badge of commitment to the far right. An important point is that an alarming degree of this kind of conformity happens unconsciously. Indeed, we have a tendency to mentally suppress information that runs contrary to group consensus. This tendency appears to be related to the fact that humans are exquisitely talented at detecting liars, cheaters, or even insincerity. And so, the ability to self-deceive may have developed to conceal our true beliefs from our own tribe mates. This ability may have kept our ancestors from getting murdered by their peers. We inherited this tendency, and it seems to be concentrated, though not exclusive, to the political right. The left has their own blinders, which I plan to discuss on a later episode. Resisting stay-at-home orders, or simply refusing to wear masks, is not simply a matter of ignorance. It's not that the extreme right lacks access to the basic science about the spread of disease. In fact, we're all bombarded with this information on the subject, and even the tightest information bubble has its holes. It's that accurate information gets deflected by the Teflon coating of our tribal psychology, and for protesters or Trump rally goers infecting each other during a deadly pandemic, along with innocent bystanders at the grocery store where they shop, or even their own president, rejecting masks or stay-at-home orders have become badges of tribal commitment. When protesters see each other in their tribal regalia, when they chant in unison, when they see each other not wearing masks, they feel an ancient, emotionally intuitive sense of belonging. And by identifying an outside force, represented by the liberal media, science, etc., their emotional ties are drawn even closer. Moreover, by cohering to the preposterous idea that social distancing is a liberal conspiracy, they reaffirm each other's commitment to the tribe. And COVID deniers will self-deceive in order to fit in. But this puts everyone, including themselves and the President of the United States, at grave risk. It's antisocial, it's dangerous, but it is explainable. We are social animals operating in groups inclined to show commitment to one another through agreement. What we agree upon can be like a virus itself. It can spread through a population and cause great harm. And critical thinking gets swallowed by our ancient fears of rejection. Correcting these dangerous evolutionary mismatches is no small order, and we may never correct them fully. But the single biggest inoculation may be to ensure that critical thinking skills, including a study of our evolved psychology, are a mandatory part of public education. But the point here is not only that ignorance of our evolved psychology makes us more vulnerable to infectious disease, is that such ignorance makes us vulnerable to ourselves. COVID-19 protesters are just one among so many examples. It is time to give reason and science, the evolutionary sciences in particular, more, not less of a role in how we conduct human affairs, including the management of infectious diseases. We neglect doing so at our own peril. Thanks for watching. I've been Dr. Hector Garcia. You can find my books on Amazon and Audible. Links are in the description. You can reach me at hector-garcia.com. If you enjoyed what you watched today and want to hear more of me, be sure to like and subscribe and consider supporting me on Patreon.